Do you think the FNAF lore is confusing? Are you tired of remembering all these dates, details, and an actual story being told? Do you hate every single book that's recently been dropped with information that may debunk your theory? Do you have reading comprehension issues? Well, you are the lucky one today, because I introduce you to our new product, Parallels. With the use of our new product, Parallels, you'll be able to pick and choose what information only you need to confirm your bias. Whole backstories of characters won't matter anymore thanks to our Parallels. Pick and choose what details you think are important while being able to completely ignore the bigger picture. The procedure to do this is very simple. All you have to do is pick one of the lame, actually developed characters from the books and attach them to any of the 6 characters from our character list. This list includes classic characters like William, Henry, Michael, Baby/Elizabeth, Charlie/Puppet, and don't forget a little Cassidy. By claiming there are parallels, you'll be able to simply copy-paste the development of the book character onto the blank slate of the game character. There you have it! Your scary book character that maybe debunks your whole theory is now watered down to a simple parallel, or how we like to call it, they got parallel. Buy your parallel now! Just call the number on screen right now. And if you buy 2 parallels right now, you'll get free circuit review evidence with it. Call now! Hello guys, welcome to the final part of Continuities from the Pizzaplex. Thank you so much for supporting the first 2 parts. I'm glad to have you back for the last one. Today we'll be talking about the other side of the argument about parallels. Today I'll talk about multiple popular parallel theories and explain my issues with them, and why the use of parallels in this franchise is really flawed. Also first, a content warning. With this video I'm not trying to attack any content creator or person that uses parallels. My videos are meant to represent my opinion on the matter. Remember to do your own research and come to your own conclusions when it comes to FNAF lore. So please never go out and attack someone that has different opinions than yours. Anyways, let's not waste any more time. Before going into the most popular parallel theories when it comes to the Pizzaplex books, it's probably best for me to define what a parallel actually is in the first place. A parallel is basically something that is very similar to another thing, while both still existing at the same time. But how exactly does this work in storytelling? Well, let me give you a definition. The term parallel stories, also referred to as parallel narratives and parallel plots, denotes a story structure in which the writer includes 2 or more separate narratives linked by a common character, event, or theme. Parallel stories enrich a work and have been used by playwriters and novelists for centuries. To make the meaning of this even more clear, I found a perfect example about parallelism on the 15-minute movie method website. Let's read it. In the Disney animated Tarzan, the gorilla mother loses a baby when a leopard kills it. Then this same leopard kills Tarzan's parents. Later, Tarzan kills this leopard and offers the dead body to the gorilla leader as a way to make up for the gorilla leader losing his own son to the leopard. When stories link and parallel each other, it reinforces the story and helps us remember the significance of earlier information. If every part of the story were completely different, then the story would feel more like just a collection of random scenes. Well, this shows that parallels between characters are often used to strengthen the plot. In other media, this is also often used to make a connection between the main protagonist and the main antagonist, by making both characters' backstories similar, but them ending up in completely different circumstances, making them the perfect reflection to each other. An example from this in other media is the relationship between Legoshi and Bill from Beastars. Bill is a minor antagonist in the 2nd episode of Season 1 and the perfect foil to Legoshi. Both are carnivores, struggling with their carnivore instincts to digest meat. But while Legoshi tries to suppress this side of his nature, Bill embraces it, causing Legoshi to act out on him because he sees himself in Bill, this side of himself that he hates, causing the two to develop an antagonistic relationship between each other, while in reality both are 2 sides of the same coin. Even FNAF itself has an example like this. An example I already brought up in the first video. In the Silver Eyes trilogy, the main protagonist Charlie is a direct parallel to the main antagonist of the 3rd book, Baby. Both have a similar backstory, both being daughters neglected by their fathers in different ways. And that's why Baby specifically hates Charlie, because Charlie is treated like a better version of herself. The version of Charlie that was loved by Henry. The version of Charlie that William wants. While she herself is constantly seen as a mistake by both her fathers. Okay, I think I made pretty clear how parallels work, but if parallels are so important to storytelling, you may wonder why I have such a big issue with them being used for theories. Well, that's because parallels are used by theorists in a completely different way. The most popular parallel theory when it comes to the Tales from the Pizzaplex books is the parallel between Edwin and Henry. Like I established in the previous video, Edwin is a single father that works for Fazbear Entertainment. To keep his son occupied, he creates a robot playmate. One day, his son runs out of the house, causing him to get hit by a car and die. Out of grief, Edwin beats up the mimic endoskeleton, infecting it with his agony. Does this scene sound familiar? Well, to most theorists, it does. In the Silver Eyes trilogy, Henry, after the death of his daughter, builds 4 Charlie bots in different ages. When he's ready to make the 4th one, however, he slowly starts to realize what he's doing is actually wrong. So when he builds the 4th Charlie bot, he builds it with rage, infecting the last robot with his agony, leaving it unfinished. Most theorists see these 2 storylines paralleling each other as evidence that only one of the 2 events actually happened. They treat the mimic story as a symbolic puzzle that gives insight in what actually happened in the game universe, saying that Edwin is actually a stand-in for Henry in the Tales from the Pizzaplex universe, and using this as confirmation that the mimic in the games is created by Henry to mimic Charlie, and also indirectly seeing this as confirmation that the glitch virus is actually an AI copy of Charlie. And boy, do I have a lot to say about this one. But for starters, do I actually think these 2 scenes parallel each other? Well, yes, I definitely think so. But I don't think they parallel each other for the reasons a lot of theorists assume they do. Both scenes are similar because both focus on a similar theme in FNAF: agony. Both scenes are alike because both scenes depict an object being affected by agony, showing how something can get possessed by emotions inside the world of Five Nights at Freddy's. So of course they parallel each other, but that doesn't mean Edwin can't exist in the games universe, nor does it mean he's actually Henry. For starters, a lot of people assume Edwin must be Henry from another universe because they both invent the classic animatronics: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. But that claim isn't even true. In the Mimic story, Edwin is hired to turn the animatronic suits into functioning animatronics. The suits are sent to him by Fazbear Entertainment. That's why the workers go back to the factory to retrieve the suits in the first place. They're the company's property. Making the robotic endoskeletons themselves is Edwin's only job. He never invented the character of Chica. He just got hired to turn Chica, the animatronic suit, into a working animatronic. Another big misconception in modern FNAF seems to be that Fazbear Entertainment was a company with only 2 or 3 locations. That only the locations we see in the games ever actually existed. But it's heavily implied in both books and games that Fazbear Entertainment was a company with multiple locations. So Edwin was just hired because they need more people to work on animatronics for multiple locations. Edwin making animatronic endoskeletons for a Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy suit doesn't mean he built the original Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. The existence of the Mimic even supports this point. Why would Fazbear Entertainment need to make a series of animatronics endoskeletons to learn and copy show routines if Freddy's was only one location? That would only make sense if they had multiple locations that need their own Freddy band members that needed to be programmed with the same show routines as the one that already exists. Also, saying Edwin is a Henry parallel caused a lot of issues for the Mimic story itself. MadBat specifically mentions a lot how Henry and William are never mentioned in the Pizzaplex books, meaning they don't exist in that continuity. But nothing can be further from the truth. In the story Pressure, it's mentioned multiple times how William Afton was the real person that murdered kids at Freddy's locations. Also, if Henry didn't exist, the Mimic storyline could have never happened. One of the key locations in the Mimic-related stories is Freddy's Pizza Place, the location of Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator. The same building that was burned down by Henry in the games. A trap he made to bring all the remaining possessed animatronics together and burn them. The mere existence of this building implies that the events of that game happened before the Mimic epilogues, and debunks most of what parallel theorists are claiming. Both William and Henry are heavily implied to have existed in the Pizzaplex books, so it's heavily flawed to imply that Edwin somehow is Henry in this universe. This also creates issues for Edwin's son, David, being a parallel to Charlie. This theory already had a lot of flaws in the first place. Most theories are connected to because both have a father, making a robot mimicking the child out of grief. Kind of. Edwin builds the mimic before David's death, as a way to keep his son occupied. Meanwhile, Henry creates the Charlie bots out of grief, as an active way to replace his daughter after she died. The mimic and the fourth Charlie bot are made in completely different circumstances. Both of them get infected by agony in a similar way, but they aren't made for similar reasons. Also, comparing Charlie's dad to David's dad is... oh boy. People claim both Charlie and David died because of a car-related incident. But this couldn't be further from the truth. David gets actively hit by a car and dies. Charlie is killed by William after he steps out of a car. William's car itself wasn't even really relevant to the death of Charlie. One death is a complete accident, and the other one is an intentional murder. And saying all of this is also ignoring a giant issue with this claim. Charlie never died this way in the books. All the evidence used for this parallel to work come from the Silver Eyes trilogy. But every theorist somehow ignores Charlie's death from that same book series, and instead compare it to Charlie's death from the games. In the trilogy, Charlie is killed by William at Fredbear's in a closet full of suits. So yes, Charlie's death in the books ironically enough does parallel her death in the games, both being killed by William near Fredbear's. But both of them barely have any connections to David's deaths from the mimic story. Another issue is that, well, by the same logic parallel theorists used to say Edwin is Henry, you could claim multiple characters in these books are also Henry. FNAF constantly tells stories about similar topics like grief and emotional energy. So of course there are multiple stories that are just as much as a parallel to Henry from the trilogy as the mimic story is. Example 1. Felix the Shark. Yeah, you didn't see that one coming, did you? The story about a robotic shark. Well, ironically enough, the character Felix the Shark has just as much parallels with David as Charlie does. The story follows a kid named Dirk, who is looking to find proof of his childhood mascot, Felix the Shark, being a real animatronic. After traveling around, he finds out the truth about Felix. Felix the Shark was only ever present in one Freddy's location. The owner of this specific Freddy's location had a son who drowned at sea. The only reason they were able to find the son's body was because a real shark pushed his body to shore. I know, pretty crazy. As a memorial to his dead son, the owner created Felix the Shark as a star attraction at his location. See the connections? An owner of a Freddy's location making an animatronic out of grief after his son died. This guy had the same amount of connections to Henry as Edwin does. He owns a Freddy's location, he lost his child, he made a robot out of grief. See how easy it is to make a parallel? A franchise using similar themes isn't confirmation that all these characters are the same. But hey, if you're not convinced yet, I have an even better example. There's actually an even bigger example in the latest Tales from the Pizzaplex book. Example 2. Together Alone. Little warning here, depending on when this video comes out, this book may not have been released yet. So if you don't want spoilers for this specific story, please skip to the timestamp I put on screen right now. Alright, let's get into it. The story Together Alone follows a protagonist named Travis. All story long, he tries to make a machine that can play chess. The wooden figure in the machine is based off the daycare attendant from the Pizzaplex. To make a long story short, the twist at the end of the story is that Travis was dead and a ghost all along. Apparently, he died years ago while trying to make the son animatronic machine by getting himself stuck inside of it. His dad, however, didn't know where his son went after his death. So out of grief, he made a copy of the same machine his son was working on. During the story, Travis doesn't realize he's dead because his dad still talks to him. His dad is constantly doing the same routine, waking him up, making him food, talking to him before he goes to bed, as if his son never died in the first place. Later, when his dad realizes he was lying to himself, he destroys the copy of the wooden son animatronic he made out of rage. Yeah, you probably also see the parallels here. Single father that lost his son makes a robot to remember him, pretending he never died in the first place, and afterwards destroys the machine out of grief. This guy is also very similar to Edwin and Henry, and the funny thing is that he literally exists in the same book series as Edwin does. So if that doesn't make the point clear that Edwin is his own character and not Henry with a different name, then I don't know what will convince you. And this is in general the core issue with parallels. Theorists think if a similar event to the games happened in the books, no matter how small the connections are, it somehow confirms the other event didn't happen at all. This mindset completely goes against the purpose of parallels, because the point of parallels in storytelling is that two similar events, characters, or things do exist along each other. A bunch of unique characters that get introduced in these book series get watered down to just being another version of an already existing character, like Henry, Charlie, Michael, Elizabeth, and all because these characters' stories share similar elements. Themes that have been consistent with the FNAF story in the first place. Most definitions of parallel will include the element of both things existing at the same time. It's like saying when two lines in math are parallel to each other, that one of the two lines doesn't exist. But somehow this isn't the only issue. Somehow this issue goes even deeper. Yep, we're focusing on trilogy again, like we did in the first chapter of this video series. Everything is coming full circle. If you ask most theorists why they use parallels when talking about the Pizzaplex books, they'll all mostly use the same excuse. I think they're similar to the trilogy. The trilogy is a separate continuity, so why wouldn't these be? Scott said the books weren't canon since the trilogy. The trilogy, the trilogy, the trilogy. So let's all take a step back. If you treat the Pizzaplex books as parallels because of the trilogy, then why does no one use the trilogy as parallels? Yep, I just said that. I already went into detail on the difference between the Charlie trilogy and the Pizzaplex books in my first part of this series. But even when theorists say they need to be treated the exact same way, for some reason they still treat the trilogy differently from the other books. Let's go back to the example from earlier. People claim Edwin is a parallel to Henry, right? We take this completely different character and claim he's actually this other character in another universe, based off similar elements. Right? That's apparently how we are supposed to use the books to solve the games, attach these new characters to old characters. And now look back at how we use a trilogy for evidence. And you slowly realize, wait, we never used the trilogy series in that exact same way. And you may call out, well, Krav, is it because in these books, Henry, William, and Charlie are actually main characters? Well, yeah, you have a point. But they weren't introduced in the games franchise yet, when the first book released. And somehow we never saw any issue with this. When William Afton was name-dropped in the Silver Eyes, we immediately accepted him as Purple Guy. When Henry was introduced as a co-owner of Fredbear's with William, people immediately accepted him into the canon, even if he never made an appearance until Pizzeria Simulator a year later. So when people claim we are treating the new books as parallels because of the trilogy setting up as precedent, that's straight up a lie. We never used the trilogy as parallels. And if we actually did, theories back then would have looked very different. Like, something like this. The Silver Eyes book released in September 2016. Back then, only the first 4 FNAF games were out. A story Scott considered to be done by then. Back then, we didn't know much about Purple Guy, apart from him being the killer. But back then, there was also a very popular theory going around. The now infamous theory of Purple Guy being Phone Guy. And hey, I can blame people for believing it. But once the Silver Eyes released and introduced us to William Afton, we immediately dropped that theory. But if we used the same parallel logic back then as we use them right now, William Afton wouldn't be the reveal of Purple Guy. But instead, William Afton would be an alternative universe parallel to Phone Guy. William may be the killer in this book series, but we clearly know from the games he's Phone Guy. Like, the name William is never dropped in these first 4 games. And there's like, so much evidence for it. The silly phone in his FNAF 2 sprite, the fact he's known so much about the Springhawk suits like Phone Guy. And William in the Silver Eyes is also a night guard, just like Phone Guy. That seems like a one-to-one parallel to me, and this clearly is actually evidence to indicate that Phone Guy was Purple Guy all along, and William Afton, in this universe, is just a parallel to Phone Guy. Okay. I think you get my point. Do you see my issue? Back then, we immediately accepted William into the canon and moved on. Of course, this ended up being White, and William was revealed to be the real identity, the purple guy, in the games too, once this location came around. So it's curious that once the short story series comes around, that we started to treat the books differently, when it came to using them as evidence. No longer did we just accept plot points, but we started to treat the new storylines and characters as some complicated riddle that was actually a twisted version of what happened in the game series. It's even more silly that we keep doing it when we did the exact same with the Mimic character. And he also ended up showing up in Rune. So if you look at the past of the books, it seems to be pretty consistent how Scott uses characters. Scott never invents completely new characters to be stand-ins for old characters. If he wants to use a character for a story, he will simply use them. Saying that other characters are actually stand-ins for already existing characters makes the story way more complicated than it needs to be. I fully delved into the Silver Eyes trilogy and its meaning all the way back in the first chapter of the first video. And Scott already pretty much established what these books are. They are a reimagining of the original FNAF story. They were never meant to be complicated parallel stories, but a new story using similar elements from the original story to make a completely new narrative. And the story clearly shows when it reuses elements from the games. We know that this trilogy of books is a reimagining of the games because it constantly reinvents old storylines to fit into a new narrative. William's death, Elizabeth's scooping, the missing children incident, Charlie's death, all these events happened back in the games, but changed to fit into this new book series. And even if you think these are also simply parallels, let's compare the trilogy parallels with the Pizzaplex parallels. First, here's an example of a trilogy parallel. You see both William die in this scene. The connection here is pretty clear. Same scene, just slightly different when it comes to who exactly killed him. But William dies in Spring Bonnie in both cases and becomes Springtrap afterwards. Next, same here, in both cases Charlie is killed by William around Fredbear's. A clear, obvious parallel. Same here, in both continuities Elizabeth is scooped up by Circus Baby. The location may be different, but both continuities she ends up possessing Circus Baby. You see, two existing events that parallel each other. And now, to show the insanity of it all, let's directly compare these parallels with the parallels in the Pizzaplex books. So here is our first parallel, the one we've been talking about all video long. The parallel between Henry and Edwin. Edwin's story parallels the story of Henry back in the Silver Eyes continuity. And the parallels between these two storylines somehow implies that something similar must have happened in the game's continuity. So these two separate continuities paralleling each other somehow has implications on the third continuity. Even though in the games there's no example there, when it comes to the Silver Eyes, we see a clear parallel in the books with a clear parallel in the games. They connect to each other. But there is no games version of this event. We are paralleling two different continuities to find an implication about the game's continuity. Now, second example. I'm bringing up a completely different theory for this one. Some people think the storyteller tree in the books is a parallel to the giant Freddy head, and also the blob. This is somehow even a worse example. Some theorists believe that the giant Freddy head we see in the sinkhole in Security Breach was actually the game's version of the storyteller. So instead of accepting these books as canon, we just say these stories have a game variant in the game universe, with no evidence, and connect it back to a random detail in Security Breach. But how can you call it a parallel? The point of a parallel is that two things are similar, two events parallel each other. You can't use a parallel as evidence when you are paralleling it with something you made up. And now the third kind of parallel. Greg is a parallel to Gregory. Do I even need to explain this one? They are literally just the same character. There isn't even a parallel here. GGY is a story that gives more context to what we see in the games. It's not the same event we see in Security Breach. It's an event that gives more context to the events we see in Security Breach. In the trilogy, you can say these events are parallels because there are different versions of the same event. But GGY is giving more context to Gregory. There isn't even a parallel here. It's two different situations that follow up to one another. It's literally a direct prequel. And that's what most Pizzaplex parallel theories are. It's either comparing an event in these books with an event that happened in the trilogy to somehow imply that the same event also happened back in the games. Or it's using a story, saying the story isn't canon, but a game's version of it happened, and say how you think the story happened in the games is a parallel to the story. Or, worse, it's just picking a direct prequel story that fits directly into the game story and calling it a parallel. But if you want to push that a version of the story happened in the games, why simply not claim they are canon? In the first video, I went into detail why these books are canon, and how they connect back directly to the plot of the games, and with the amount of evidence and relevance these stories have to the current plot. It seems pretty pointless to say they are just parallels, if you're gonna use them anyways. Because most parallel theories are just that, using a story with new characters, saying they are actually old characters, just to afterwards complain that Scott doesn't let go of old characters. So, what's the point? And even after the release of Rune, somehow this discussion still isn't over. I think it's pretty silly that people think that the literal mimic showing up, the antagonist that has been built up for 7 books already before Rune, isn't confirmation that the book series that was all about him is canon. But instead it's confirmation that the Charlie Bot storyline from back in the Fort Closet is relevant to the game story now. Why? Well, I think I said enough. This has been ClavisKey, and thanks for hearing me out. I see you guys in the next video. That's my first set of videos finished. So you probably wonder, what's next for this channel? Well, I have a few topics I want to talk about. 2 videos that are currently in the writing phase are a full modern FNAF timeline, talking about the complete second arc from the franchise, starting from Help Wanted till Rune. Another video I'm excited to make is talking about the misconceptions about the indie game storyline in Help Wanted. That's something I really want to clear up. But apart from theory videos, I was also thinking about making summary videos on all the stories from the books, if you guys are interested in that. Anyways, thanks to the people that have been here since video 1. I appreciate all the support and positive feedback. Well, just thank you for everything, guys. This has been ClavisKey, and thank you for sticking around. I'll see you in the next video, whatever that may be.
Oh my god, it's Halloween. Wish I had a friend with me. Every year, I'm all alone. I have no reason to leave my home. Bought a costume that's really funny, but why dress up if I have nobody? Lonely Halloween! It's a lonely Halloween. Lonely Halloween! No one hears me scream.